Good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon, and it's that time of year where producers are thinking about what's in the soil. And Brian, producers are going to be out in the fields right now of canola and wheat, and what should they be looking for?
You know, right now is a perfect time to be scouting for about everything. There's some incidents of disease that are starting to pop up, but we need to be looking at those plants for nutrient deficiencies and making plans. You know, we've had that fall that had good growth, those areas that had good moisture had really good fall growth. Then we went into one of our wettest winters we've had in quite a while. So with rainfall comes water movement down the soil profile, and when water moves down soil profile, so do our mobile nutrients such as nitrogen and sulfur. So especially in canola this year, in a crop that we do not put a lot of pre-plant nitrogen out, and a crop that is sensitive to sulfur, we need to be looking in two areas. One, we need to get out on that canola crop as soon as the ground dries and the temperature allows for it. With that, because of the season, if we're going to see a sulfur response in any year, it's going to likely be this year. So look at opportunity to throw a few pounds of sulfur in with that top dress. It doesn't need to be any particular expensive source, but get a few pounds of sulfur out there so as that crop starts getting into this green up time, it has plenty of nitrogen and sulfur. We've seen a lot of concerns about purpling in the canola crop. It tends to be anything that causes stress in the canola plant creates a purple coloration. So I've seen areas where it's a nitrogen stress, phosphorus stress, soil pH stress, even moisture stress in certain areas have caused that purple color in canola. So the answer is it's a stress of some kind. To answer that, we need either just soil samples from good and bad areas or soil samples plus tissue samples from the good and bad areas to compare that in the lab and see, is it a nutrient, is it a soil, what's going on.
Is this the time of year to actually be getting out there doing that application?
Absolutely. You know, with both winter wheat and canola, we can have applications starting in December, moving on through. For the canola crop, you really have to be out there before bolt. That is that time frame we need to get out there before that bolt starts coming up, which could be in the next month or so, depending on what you're planting. On wheat, we always try to get out there before jointing or hollow stem. The same time the dual purpose guys are pulling off cattle is that end of the time when you want to be out there with your top dress. Wheat can respond later. So if we have deficiencies develop after that time, it's still worth a look at maybe getting out there with a sprayer and getting some nitrogen on then.
Now let's talk more about wheat. We're always talking about, you know, this is the time to be out there. What are you seeing in the wheat?
You know, the wheat, those that went out with just pre-plant starter fertilizer only have been trying to get out there. It is the time we need to get nitrogen out on those fields that just had that starter fertilizer and nothing else. Get out there as soon as possible, get that on. Those that went out there with a pre-plant in September or August, anhydrous pre-plant, we're seeing those residual nitrogen values very low, probably due to the leaching we've had. So I would be very cautious, even if you were all pre-plant up front, to be out scouting your fields. Look for any symptomology of nitrogen deficiencies. And if these fields have been grazed and going to grain, consider how much removal has been made by that beef and maybe replace it, because this year we've likely lost some nitrogen due to leaching. Even if it hasn't gone really deep, our soils have a tendency to have sideward movement. If you have a limiting layer somewhere around 10 to 16 inches down, water will hit that, and if there's any kind of slope, it will follow that slope downhill.
There's actually certain ways to apply that nitrogen that are better than others.
Absolutely. You know, any opportunity to get out there with nitrogen right now, we should be looking at it. New applicators anhydrous, we can top dress with anhydrous now. Urea is always an option. Try to time it with a rainfall or get it in that way. But more and more we have a lot of liquid applicators going out there. So sprayers putting on UAN. While that dual pass UAN and herbicide is always efficient, we got to be careful, because with a dual pass herbicide UAN, we're stuck with using a flat fan nozzle. And when you combine that with the no-till environment, whether you were in wheat or canola, we have an opportunity to tie up a lot of that nitrogen that we're applying in the residue. So it's always my recommendation, if you can split that herbicide and the nitrogen application, especially in no-till, we should do that and use streamer nozzles or something that concentrates that liquid into bands to push it through that residue.
And thank you very much, Brian. And for more information on that, you can go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu. As we get closer to first hollow stem, this is a great time to remind you of a tool from the Oklahoma Mesonet to help you decide when to pull your cattle off your wheat.
Okay, this is a really great tool that we developed over the past, say, 5 to 10 years, using 17 years of first hollow stem dates in the regional research plots around here. And we found that the goal was to develop a weather-based model that could predict when first hollow stem would occur, because that's the date when you want to remove your cattle from your wheat fields to minimize your loss from your wheat. Leaving cattle on after that will decrease your yield, research has shown. But we did the research and we found that 4-inch soil temperatures under vegetative cover were best correlated with these first hollow stem dates. And so what we developed were 3 different mathematical models for 3 different classes of wheat varieties, depending on if they have first hollow stem early in the season, in the middle of the season, or toward the end of the season. And then we put these models on a very useful product on the mesonet.org website. You can find it in the agriculture section of that website, and it's called the First Hollow Stem Advisor. And what it offers are the current conditions across the state in map form, and it gives 1 and 2 week projections based on the average, and those maps have a legend that shows the probability levels of first hollow stem occurring the current time, 1 week from today, and 2 weeks from today. And it's color coded so that once you get to the above 5% level, they turn from blue to green. Once they get over 50%, they turn from orange to red. And what we encourage growers to do is to, if they can, have time to scout the ungrazed portion of their wheat field once that level gets to 5%, just as a conservative measure. People who don't scout, we encourage them to definitely remove their cattle by the time the probability reaches the 50% level. We also have charts and tables which can be accessed for individual Mesonet sites, and they give the current through the 2 week projection period, and there's a line showing the 50% and the 5% probability level, so they can see at a given Mesonet site when those 5 and 50% levels are predicted to be reached.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. Warm, sunny days add on the heat units as we enter the last month of winter. Checking on wheat first hollow stem heat units for early group varieties through Tuesday, January 26th, wheat fields in Murray County and in Choctaw and McCurtain counties had enough heat units to warrant scouting. By next Wednesday, February 3rd, the situation is projected to change rapidly, with early group wheat fields in the orange areas moving close to 50% probability of having reached the first hollow stem stage. Jumping ahead 2 weeks to February 10th, the green area that indicates the earliest need for scouting moves north to pick up a lot more area. Warmer days can lead to lower relative humidities. If we add wind to that in an area with lots of dead grass, we can wind up with burning index values climbing in the afternoon. On Wednesday afternoon at 4 p.m., the area up in Osage County had red-orange coloring, an indicator of higher fire danger. Burning index values at Newkirk, Foraker, and Copan were above 60. Earlier Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., the burning index map was green across the state, showing very low fire danger. Here's Gary with a check on January's rainfall.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. Well, a lot of you are probably asking, what happened to the moisture? After that wet November, December with all the rain, snow, and ice, Mother Nature really shut off the spigots. Let's take a look at the latest rainfall map from the Mesonet for January, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Well, after that record-setting rain of November and December, and really all of 2015 for that matter, remember it ended up as the wettest year on record for the state of Oklahoma by about 5 inches, the start of 2016 has been fairly dry. Not that shocking since January is our driest month out of the year, but a bit surprising after the wet end of 2015. And if we look at the map, we can see January will end up with about a statewide average of around 7/10 of an inch of rain or so, or about 50% of normal. That will make it one of the 30 driest Januaries on record for the state since records began back in 1895. And you can see from this percent of normal map from the Mesonet, really only southwestern and west central Oklahoma, and a little bit up into north central Oklahoma, came out ahead during January. So we could use some rainfall despite what we got at the end of last year. El Nino still going strong. There's still that potential for some big storms coming up. We're just going to have to wait and see. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
It was towards the end of November we were out here by Marshall, and Gerald, you guys were putting out cattle. How are the cattle doing so far?
These calves came from, they're ranch calves. They came off a ranch in north central Montana. They're really a dynamite set of calves. They've got incredible growth potential. The health on them has been really, really good. They were placed on wheat pasture on November 20. And so we're here today on January 27, so that's about 68 days that they've been here. We've had excellent wheat pasture. In fact, today we've got still really good supply of wheat pasture. A lot of green, much greener than normal. Usually this wheat would be sort of freeze burn, a lot drier, a lot lower in quality. I'm not sure I've ever seen wheat look quite this green at this time of the year. We've checked weight some of these calves. They've gained about 2.15 pounds a day, so they're about 150 pounds bigger than they were when we first put them on wheat pasture. You know, the traditional role of a stocker cattle industry is to gather calves from across the country, get them healthy, add weight to them as cheaply as possible, and basically cheapen those calves back or drive the break-even selling price down before they go on to the next phase of production. These calves are a little bit behind what we would like for them to be, but they have been in a lot of mud since we placed them on wheat. The latter part of November was pretty wet, and December we received about 2.7 inches of rain, and so the mud has actually slowed these cattle down a little bit, but very many days like today, they're going to make up for a lot of that lost gain.
And this year with this lush of forage, it's kind of been a little tougher for cattle producers with bloat.
It has been, and once we get cattle straightened out and on wheat pasture, bloat is our primary herd health problem. On wheat pasture, it's a frothy bloat, meaning that the fermentation gases that are produced in the rumen in the process of digesting the forage are trapped in that foam or froth. So the cattle cannot eructate or belch that gas normally. Our approach to decreasing the incidence of bloat, there's two ionophores. Our studies indicate that monensin is more efficacious in decreasing both the incidence and severity of bloat. And in recent years, one of our focus has been to try to deliver an efficacious dosage of monensin to cattle on wheat by providing what's called an R1620 loose mineral mixture.
And that is actually some of the research that was conducted here by Marshall.
Yes, it was, and in fact that was the express purpose for us developing this facility over here, that it would allow us to conduct larger scale studies, larger numbers of cattle, as compared to the more intensive studies that we did with smaller numbers of cattle in the initial study on as far as Mesonet affecting bloat.
As we come back to this year, it's been an interesting year for wheat pasture. The window's a little bit smaller between green up and first hollow stem. Talk about that.
Yes, it is, and that's something we're really concerned about right now, as far as how much gain we'll be able to get on these cattle, at least in this fall-winter grazing period. And from a wheat pasture perspective, that grazing window obviously is impacted by planting date and when cattle can be placed on wheat, and then by date of first hollow stem on the tail end, and varieties affect that, because varieties vary in terms of whether they're early, mid, or late maturing with respect to first hollow stem. Again, many more days like today, 57 degrees here in January, we're probably going to have to pull these cattle earlier than normal as far as calendar date, because we do always work in a dual purpose operation to pull cattle at first hollow stem stage of maturity.
And for more information on some of the research done here by Marshall, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
As we go into this spring's calving season, we're bound to have that situation where a young cow, probably a 2-year-old, will need some assistance at calving time. And as we provide that assistance and hopefully save both the cow and the calf, the question will go through the rancher's mind: is this likely to happen again to that same cow next year? Should I put her on my book as one that I should cull next fall after weaning takes place? Well, those are really pretty difficult questions to answer, because we've spent quite a little bit of money so far in developing this young heifer and eventually as a 2-year-old cow, and we hate to just go ahead and turn her loose because we had a little trouble with calving difficulty this year. Research done clear back in the 70s at Colorado State University gives us a little bit of an indication of what we might expect in terms of the repeatability of calving difficulty in young cows. They were using Hereford cattle back in a report that came out in 1973. And they looked at the repeatability of 2-year-old Hereford heifers that had calving difficulty one year and the likelihood that it would happen again the following year. The repeatability is a calculation that they made, and it was only 4.5%. Well, let's go into what that number really means. What they found was that the heifers that had calving difficulty this year, only 11.7% of them had calving difficulty as 3-year-olds. Now, the heifers that didn't have any problems as 2-year-olds, 7% of those still had calving difficulty as 3-year-olds. So there was only a slight difference between those that had calving difficulty the 1 year and repeated it the 2nd year. One of the things that did show up in that data set that's pretty important was there was quite a difference in the percent of calf crop weaned between the heifers that had calving difficulty as 2-year-olds both years. Both when they weaned their calves as 2-year-olds and weaned their calves as 3-year-olds. And so that tells me then that that heifer that's having calving difficulty as a 2-year-old is going to be more difficult to get bred back for the following year if we have her in a defined calving season. All of this adds up to the management suggestions that I think can help us do the best job of reducing the risk of calving difficulty in those 2-year-olds, and that is to develop that heifer properly so that she's in a good body condition at calving time. Something around a 5 to a 6 in our 1 through 9 scale. 4's too thin, 7's too fat. And then breed her to a bull that we know something about the birth weight expectations of his calves. We want those heifers, of course, bred to low birth weight bulls to reduce the possibility of calving difficulty. So as we put this together then, I think we want to think through this whole heifer growing program to have the smallest percentage of them that have calving difficulty, and therefore will make more productive cows throughout the remainder of their lifetime. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
The theme for this week is change. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, some people are observing that things have been changing in the wheat market and might continue to change. What is your take on all of that?
Well, let's just look at the last couple of weeks, change in prices in the market. We had a little run up in the cash prices. The KC March contract, it increased about 15 cents. I think we had some farmers come in and sell. They saw that that contract was up near its a resistance price at 480. We closed the week back down around 465. It's close to the support price of 460.
Now, you mentioned a report. There is a report showing Canadian exports greater than U.S. exports?
And in the 2014-15 marketing year, Canadian exports, they were number one. Now, I will say this is the first time that the Canadian exports ever outranked U.S. If you look at projected for 15-16, U.S. exports are projected to be higher than Canadian exports this year.
And where does the U.S. rank in terms of wheat exports, and how's that been changing?
Well, if you look at it, the 14-15 marketing year, you had the United States second to Canada. Russia came in third. If you look at 15-16, this marketing year, Russia is looking at coming in with 14.6% of the world exports, U.S. number 2 at 13.5%, and Canada coming in at 12.7%.
What about in terms of production then? Where does the U.S. stand, and how is that kind of changing and adapting?
Well, U.S. has always been down the line in the production figures. Right now, the EU is projected to produce 5.8 billion bushels at number 1, China 4.8 billion bushels at number 2, Russia 2.24 billion bushels at number 3, and U.S. comes in third or fourth at 2.1 billion bushels.
And then last but not least, we like to always boil this down for producers. These changes, how does this impact those who are growing the wheat?
There's not much impact on it. Yes, the ranks have changed. No, we're not the big player we used to be, either production-wise, export-wise, or consumption-wise. But the market itself hasn't changed. It still requires producers to be below average in cost of production, above average in their yield and the quality of the product, and that they manage their finances. If they do that, it doesn't really matter what happens out in the world or out in the U.S. If they do that, they're going to survive and they're going to generate a profit.
And adapt to change.
And adapt to change.
Okay, Kim, we'll see you next week. Thank you. In honor of Groundhog Day, we have sort of a play on words, as in what is in groundhog or sausage. And joining us now is Jake Nelson here at the Food and Ag Product Center. Jake, let's just kind of start with a brief history of sausage making.
Wow, it goes back to antiquity. The term sausage comes from the Latin term salsus, which essentially means to be salted. And so humans figured out many years ago that salt and eventually other plant materials result in both a preservative effect on the product and something that tastes good to us.
Let's talk about some of the main ingredients in sausage. You kind of have a smorgasbord here for us.
I do.
Describe some of these.
When you talk about building sausage, it's kind of like building a structure. There's a foundation, and then there's walls and windows and a roof, and there's some similarities across many different types of sausages. We'll start with right here. The foundation spices and flavors for all sausages are salt, pepper, and sugar. Almost all sausages have that as a foundation. And I've got examples there of both a black and a white pepper that serve as that foundation. You step up then to some basic flavor profiles, and again, almost all sausages have marjoram and coriander, surprisingly. Many sausages have that, and if you put that at lower levels, it's often difficult to detect, but it gives it that characteristic sausage expectation. Many sausages today are also cured, and so they have sodium nitrite added to that, and that's again a sub-foundational ingredient to that. Then you take the step up, and we're getting into walls and windows and roofs, and there's two spices that are out there that are very common. We call those the savory twins, and that's onion and garlic. And those can come in many forms, but again, onion and garlic is almost predominant in every sausage out there. And then finally, beyond that, you get what we call the puzzlers or the teasers. And those are those flavor profiles that really define it, both through consumer preference and characterization by name. Things like red pepper and cinnamon and sage and fennel, all of those other plant materials that really separate and characterize different sausages.
And last but not least, what are these?
Yeah, and sausage is encased. I mean, because sausage essentially is a ground product, we call it comminuted in the industry. By definition, sausage is comminuted and condimented. So it's ground up and then flavored, and that's what makes sausage. But we've got all these different casings which define different types and again characterizations of sausage. We've got a plastic bag here for chub sausage. We've got some fibrous casings here for something you might see in like a semi-dry or dry sausage, such as summer sausage or pepperoni or salami. We've got actually a cellulose casing here. This is actually rayon, the same product that rayon textiles are made from. Hot dogs, very popular item for encasing hot dogs. And then finally collagen, regenerated collagen casings, which you see on smoked sausages or dinner sausages.
Okay, Jake Nelson, thanks a lot. I'm ready for breakfast now. How about you?
I'm ready.
We'll see you later.
Well, that does it for us this week. If there was something on the show that you'd like to learn more about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. And while you're there, check out our social media. I'm Dave Deacon, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.